Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and guests. Today I'd like to share a story with you. It's the story of Pinocchio. This simple story has delighted many, many people for generations since the 1940s. So I'd like to share with you the story, but at the same time relate some of the moral values and implications that this story can teach us. So let us begin. The story begins in the woodshop of a simple woodcutter, and his name is Geppetto. Geppetto is surrounded by his work. He has very intricate clocks. He has a pet cat and he has a pet fish. But Geppetto seems to be very content with his life. It's a very simple life. But towards the evening, he looks at his current work, which is a puppet. It's a small puppet of a boy. And he looks at this little puppet boy, and he names him Pinocchio. And he says, Pinocchio, it would be wonderful if you could be alive. It's a wish that he has. Of course, it's probably not going to come true, but it's just something that he thinks of. So finally, it's time for Geppetto to call it a night. But before he retires for the evening, he looks out his window, outside of his window, and he wishes upon a star. And upon that star, he wishes that his little creation, his little puppet, could become a real boy. So finally, Geppetto falls asleep. And who should appear but a fairy? And the fairy hovers over the little wooden creature, and she gives him life. But this life is not really a full life. Pinocchio can walk, he can talk, and have movements like a human. But the fairy tells him, you will not be truly human until you prove yourself trustworthy, brave, and unselfish. Finally, Geppetto wakes up with all the commotion that's going on, and he realizes with astonishment that this puppet has come alive. First he's kind of scared, but then he looks with delight. My wishes come true. Pinocchio looks like a real boy. So the cat and Pinocchio and Geppetto, they dance around the room. They're full of joy of life. The next day, though, reality checks in. It's time for Pinocchio to go to school. He has to exit outside that door, and he has to choose right from wrong. He has to make moral decisions every day. Right outside the door, he meets almost immediately a wily fox and his companion. The fox, he does a double take. He sees this little wooden puppet boy walking down the street, and he sees dollar signs. He says, you know what? He tells his companion, I'm going to sell this puppet boy to the evil Stromboli puppet master, and we can make a lot of money. So what does he do? He starts talking to Pinocchio. He says, you don't need to go to school. You can become an actor. You can have the lights and the glamour and the easy life. And Pinocchio, instead of listening to his conscience, he follows the wily fox. He performs in the marionette show, and the audience seems to love him, and Pinocchio is delighted by all the attention. As evening rolls around, the evil Stromboli is counting all the money that he's made off of the show, and Pinocchio seems to be satisfied. But he says, you know what, I want to go home now. And the evil Stromboli says, you're never going home. He goes, you're going to be in this cage forever. I'll only let you out to perform the shows. Pinocchio weeps. He misses his father. But who should appear? But Jiminy Cricket. Jiminy Cricket appears throughout the story of Pinocchio as Pinocchio's conscience. Throughout the story, Jiminy Cricket is always telling Pinocchio to do the right thing. More often than not, Pinocchio does not listen to the little cricket. But as he's talking with his conscience, who should appear? The Blue Fairy once again. The Blue Fairy asks Pinocchio, how did you get into this predicament? And what does Pinocchio do? He starts to tell one lie after another. And with every single lie, his nose grows longer and longer and longer. Pretty soon his lies are as plain as the nose on his face. And the Blue Fairy knows it. But she's got a merciful heart, and she says, you know what, Pinocchio, I'm going to give you another chance. But this is your final chance. You need to prove yourself brave, trustworthy, and unselfish. So his nose is restored. He gets a second chance. But this second chance is short-lived. Because before you know it, he's been tempted by the fox again the following day, and he ends up on an island. This island is called Pleasure Island, and it's a complete moral breakdown for young boys. They can do very unselfish things. They can break windows. They can play pool, which is not bad in itself, but they can drink. They can smoke. Do anything that a little boy would want to do. They don't have to go to school. So in one of for some, the scariest parts of the movie, at one time, Pinocchio and his friend are playing pool, and they're just bragging about they have the easy life and they don't have to do anything. And to Pinocchio's horror, his friend is turning into a jackass. He's turning into a donkey. And the more he talks, pretty soon he's spouting a tail and he's getting ears. Pretty soon he's a full-fledged donkey. And Pinocchio is really frightened, and Pinocchio starts growing ears too. But who should appear? Jiminy Cricket. And miraculously, they get out of Treasure Island and they return to Pinocchio's father's house. But they realize that Geppetto has gone looking for Pinocchio. Pinocchio's been missing. And they also find out that Geppetto is been swallowed by a whale. He's in the stomach of a whale. So Pinocchio and Jiminy go looking for the father. They jump into the ocean. And before you know it, they too have also landed in the belly of a whale. The situation looks hopeless. But Pinocchio comes up with an idea. He starts a fire. And pretty soon the whale sneezes. And Pinocchio and his father are pushed out of the mouth of the whale. And miraculously, they escape the whale, who's furious that they've gotten loose. But in all the commotion, they get to land safely. But in the commotion, Pinocchio has died in the process of saving his father. Looks like all has been lost for poor Geppetto. He's looking at his poor little puppet boy, lifeless there on the seashore, on the sand. And the fairy appears once more. And she says, Pinocchio, because you proved yourself brave, truthful, and unselfish, you will become a real boy. So she waves her wand, and Pinocchio, he comes back alive, but he's no longer a puppet. He's really a boy. So that's where the story ends. The story ends, of course, Geppetto, the cat, and the fish, and Pinocchio. They're full of delight, and they live happily ever after, hopefully. But what can Pinocchio teach us? I think one thing that I pulled from it as I rewatched it this weekend is, what does it mean to be truly alive? I looked at Geppetto, and I think we always look at Pinocchio, but I looked at Geppetto this time, and he was not truly alive either. Yes, he was surrounded by his work, his pets, and he seemed content, but he longed for more. He wanted the companionship of his son, the human relationship. Pinocchio, of course, the morality we can pull from him is, of course, do not lie. That's the big thing everybody knows. If politicians get, how many Pinocchios did you say during the debate? Every lie. But I think you can even pull more. I think ultimately it's what truly makes us alive. It's the sacrifice, love we give for another, being brave, truthful, and unselfish. So I encourage all of you to take another look at Pinocchio. Thank you.